Good day, good night, and welcome. I'm Kevin Laramée, and this is Kevin on Soccer, a unique perspective on Major League Soccer. First of all, it's good to see you. I've missed you, and that's why I'm here. I'm here to bring my imagination, what happens in my mind, a mix of numbers and soccers and fact and players on the field and images and graphics. That's what I'm bringing you with this show, a representation of who I am, and we will dive into who I am in just a few minutes, explaining the genesis of this show. But in this episode, the very first episode of Kevin on Soccer, we will be talking about the playoffs. Yes, playoffs! We will be giving a little primer on this year's playoff in Major League Soccer, from bracket to the odds-on favorite, from the bookmakers to look at what could possibly happen in this year's playoffs. The fall dance, as I like to give it a moniker. I love to give monikers. We will have monikers for everything here on Kevin on Soccer. And to finish the show today, we will also have my top potential surprises in Major League Soccer in the playoffs. Who has what it takes to maybe upset a favorite in round one of the playoffs? We will talk about this, but the first segment will be dedicated to a season overview, my thoughts on the season. It's hard to label what I want to do, but we will look at the standings in the East and the West, and we will look at the surprises and some of the things that I find interesting. Yeah, because that's what the show's all about. And after that, my top 11 of the year, position by position, from goalkeeper to forwards. We will look at not necessarily my 11 favorite players, not necessarily players that should play together, but players that, for one reason or another, the eye test, the stat test, the fact test, they made it into my top 11 of the year. Yes, it will be a fun one. Thank you for joining. Thank you for subscribing on Apple Podcasts. That's always appreciated. And thank you for subscribing to our YouTube channel as we are continuing our growth to 1,000, but also in a new way with this brand new show. And you will see some of my previews continuing moving forward also when I travel and all those different places, because that's what I do for a living now. If you're brand new, if you just found me, well, my name is Kevin Laramée. I am right now, and of course, for until they tell me I'm not, an associate producer, French-speaking associate producer for Major League Soccer. So this show is not related to anything else. It just represents my opinions only, this show. But it is, of course, an opportunity for me to travel and to meet a lot of people in the soccer world, to talk with a lot of broadcasters, play-by-play analysts around North America, from French to Spanish to English, and I get to pick their brains. We get to come to conclusions. We have some great debate. I will have some interviews going forward that we will put on our channel here. Also, if you subscribe to the podcast, thank you for subscribing to the podcast. It's always a pleasure to have you listening also. But with my travel this year, I've been working for MLS on Apple TV since February, so it's been a fun time traveling across North America, working on games from CF Montreal to Vancouver to Toronto to Miami to a bunch of great things, All-Star Game, and of course we're doing the playoff series between LAFC and Vancouver. I also had the chance this year to do my first 2 games as a French play-by-play for MLS on Apple TV, and that was quite a bucket list item, and thank you for everybody involved for making me look good in those games. But that brings me a different perspective. All my jobs that I've had, from content creator, host of Soccer Today, writer, of course, covering the team for multiple years from different eras, from 2013 all the way to recently, working on broadcasts from soccer to hockey to baseball to football. There's a lot that I've done over the last few years that reflect in this show. But this show will be happening once a week, once every 2 weeks. I don't want to put myself too much pressure, because I do want to be quality over quantity. I do want to be able to bring you something that only I can do, because your eye will be pleased with this show. Your ears should be pleased also, and it's important to bring you factual information, and that's what it's all about, and fun. We're here to have fun together, and I'm really enjoying the first few minutes that we've been spending together. I really missed you. And by the way, you haven't changed a bit. You looked just as good as last time that we were together. Now that we have gone through the introduction, thank you for joining us. Let's move and let's get to the nitty-gritty. Let's take some big steps and look at some of the winners and losers in the Eastern Conference. Let's start right now with the East. Cincinnati, overlord of Major League Soccer in 2023. They won the Supporters Shield, 69 points, a record of 20 wins, 5 losses, and 9 ties this season for the Orange team out of Ohio. Orlando finished second, Columbus, Philly, top teams that will host our series at home. New England, Atlanta, and Nashville made it through the round 1 of the playoffs. We will look at their adversaries in a few minutes. By a few minutes, I mean in segment number 2. But Charlotte and New York will face each other Wednesday evening. By the time you watch or listen to this, it might be over. But we will break down in our round 1 preview later this week. Maybe just audio. We'll see how that turns out to be with travels, because I am traveling to LA on Friday. Next show will be, with Santa Monica inspired for sure. But Montreal just missed the playoff by just a little bit. And we can maybe talk quickly about Montreal. Controversy with the end of the year press conference yesterday. A lot of players were not happy with how this team was tactically set this year, and we'll see if there's any changes happening in Montreal over the next few months, but quite something to keep an eye on moving forward for CF Montreal. We will have a segment in a few minutes that's called That's Outrageous, and you don't want to miss that. I'm gonna put one team through the ringer, and that team deserves every single bit of it. Biggest winner in the Eastern Conference so far for me this year. Teams that I did not expect to be as good as they were. Orlando, for some reason, the last couple seasons under Oscar Pereira, I was not impressed. They started to leak goals at home. They started to have a little bit more difficulties being able to keep clean sheets at home, and they started to not have just great results. But Orlando was able to have an amazing season, only plus 16 in their goal differential, 63 points in contention kind of for the Supporters Shield. Never really was an opportunity for them to win it. They were always behind the 8 ball here, but they did show some great, I guess I call it adaptability. They're not flashy, they're not going to impress you, and they're not making waves. There's no controversy, there's no big things happening out there, which I guess it's a good thing. That's what's like New England, but then they got booted in the playoffs last year. So we'll see what this playoff gives Orlando, because they do have a difficult matchup in the playoffs, and we'll talk about that later. But Orlando is my team that has overachieved this year in the Eastern Conference. While the disappointment, Montreal, they should have made it in the playoff, to be quite honest. 2 terrible results at home over the last few weeks. That Cincinnati late draw, they were in a winning position. Mistake by Jonathan Serrois, the goalkeeper, in extra time, and Montreal draws that one. Chicago, same story, different day. And then you find yourself with a difficult task of qualifying on decision day, and you left it on the field with somebody else's result having to dictate that in New York. And John Tolkien and his mullet from the penalty spot decided that they would be taking over 8th spot, Charlotte 9th, and Montreal relegated to 10th. Also, one of my disappointed this year, and we can come back to the standings, is New York City FC. What's going to happen with the Citizen? Is Nick Cushing in danger? Will they change and rethink their philosophy heading into a next season? From championship team couple years ago to irrelevancy, it's going quickly for New York City, and they do need an influx of star power. Do they wait for their new stadium, or do they go there before? That's the question. Which will they decide? I don't know. I expect same mentality next year, and maybe they start the process for 2025. We will see. But that's a bit my disappointments and my surprises. And of course, the okay performances. Philly there when it counts in the playoff, hosting a game, putting itself in good position. Columbus, the darling of Major League Soccer, the best attack in the league. We will see what they can do in the playoffs, but it won't be as easy because they do have quite an opponent in front of them that is not to take lightly in the playoffs. A little tease of what to talk about later. Let's now move to the Western Conference. Because, well, it was a fun time in the Western Conference this year. St. Louis as an expansion team, something that never been done before. As expansion team, they claw to the top of the mountain in the Western Conference mountain, so I guess it's a Rocky Mountain. They're on the top of that Rocky Mountain, and they held on, and they grabbed the brass knuckle, knocked out the goat, grabbed the 56 points, and, well, Western Conference regular season champion, St. Louis City SC. Congratulations on your first season. Not too shabby, St. Louis City FC. Ooh, we batter up Seattle up next second. As kind of a surprising season. Not too flashy once again, slowly but surely climbing that mountain in the Pacific Northwest to finish second in the West. LAFC defending champions. Third in Houston, no problem here. Houston fourth will host a playoff series versus Salt Lake. Interesting one right there. Vancouver. I'm looking at you, Ryan Gold. Gold worth every single ounce of his price tag. Brian White, efficient, back to his 2021 form. Good to see you this way, Brian White. My man will talk about you in a few minutes. Dallas, Kansas City, and San Jose showing up on decision day and making Portland miss the playoffs. Not too shabby. By the way, if we go back to the Eastern Conference, or at least just the thought of it for a second, the Red Bulls sneaking into the playoffs like this, making sure that streak continues. 14 straight playoffs for the Red Bulls. That streak was close to finishing last year. It was close to finishing this year. But they finally made it in this year. All right, let's go back to the Western Conference as we continue to look the deception. All right, the surprises. St. Louis, congratulations. You deserve every single bit of it. You impressed me how that team was built and how they moved forward together during the season. They grew. They became a unit. They became successful. And 17 wins, 12 losses. That's a lot of loss. But, you know, only 5 draws, 17 wins makes you a top team in the West. Disappointments. Portland, I'll be honest, disappointed with Portland, disappointed with Minnesota also. Minnesota, to me, had the potential, if it wasn't for the Reynoso thing, to be a better team this year. When I looked at that roster and when I called their games, I thought they were better than they were. Great organization, maybe my favorite stadium in the whole world. As of right now, it's an amazing stadium. There's a couple great stadiums in MLS, and this year I've had a chance to maybe visit all the interesting ones from Austin to Columbus to Cincinnati. Haven't seen St. Louis and Geodis Park. Those are my 2, I guess, bucket lists for next year. Hopefully I do have the chance to see them. But when we're looking at stadiums, Minnesota is quite impressive, and it's below par for them to finish 11th in the Western Conference. Austin, I guess it's a lost season for Austin. Injuries and disagreements, and maybe they'll just forget that they ever existed, move on to next year, keep the same core, keep the same staff, and just hope for 2022 magic and not 2023 troubles to show up next year. The Galaxy, though, what's going to happen there? Greg Vanney lost all his support above him in the hierarchy of this team. Chris Klein is gone. The fans are back, but this club is in turmoil. And over the last few years, for Craig Vanney, 2 out of 3 seasons without making the playoffs. This could be very interesting. The leash could be very short next year if the results don't show up. It's not just the result, though. It's the players that are due come in for Greg Vanney that haven't performed so well lately. And, well, if we're looking at Chicharito, since joining Major League Soccer, outside of his leg, he hasn't broken a lot of things. And that's a shame, and it's too bad for the Galaxy that it has unfolded that way. In Colorado, well, just another cycle starting again. If you were a Colorado Rapids fan, you know way too much about this. they get a little bit of good, they show glimpse for the year following, just like they did last year or the year before. And then they end up where they truly feel comfortable, and that's in the bottom of the Western Conference. Looking at you, Colorado Rapids, Granky. Should be better. You guys should do better. Original team in an original mess. Yeah, it's too bad. I do feel for them. But there's heroes in this league, and one of them has got a golden boot. One of them is a menace to defenders. On the pitch, in the box, he's dangerous. And he scored 20 times this year in Major League Soccer, and he's my Dennis the Menace, Golden Boot winner. Congratulations. This is the part of the show where I talk about my players that did really well this year. I call this my best ofs. My best of the strikers are right here. Dennis Bouanga. He's a menace. He's Dennis the Menace. Ain't no problem with the Mr. Wilson here. Bouanga, top of that list. Above Luciano Acosta, Giorgio Giacomakis, 17 goals both. Cucho, 16. Heck, Cucho might have finished top of that list if he had a couple more games. Such a great end of the season for Cucho. He was on fire, and that fire almost made him the Golden Boot if it wasn't for a couple great saves by Jose Roy, and he became 4 goals short of Bouanga. Quite far, but it was an interesting end of the season for Cucho. Mukhtar Brian White, 15 goals. Christian Benteke, Julian Carranza, a couple other players on 14. But I thought it was interesting to note the type of season for Dennis Bouanga. 20 goal scorers. You don't get that every season in Major League Soccer. It's fun to see. Hopefully, it's same next year, and it's a few years with straight 20 goal scorer in Major League Soccer. We can go straight ahead to my favorite passer, maybe one of my favorite players this year. When you need something delivered properly, when you need something delivered on time with the right weight and the right trajectory, you call Almada Distribution Services. "19 assists. That's to go with his great performance, also scoring goals. Maybe that red card in the last game of the season is going to be a little something keeping him off of becoming an MVP. But Almada was able to distribute like no other this year. Key passes, he's right there close to the top also. And his distribution ain't nothing to complain about. No, you don't need to call the complaint department because his distribution is on time. And I do love his contribution to Atlanta this year. Yes, he might be on his way out, but playoffs are still there to be played, and he could be a danger in the playoffs. He could be maybe, hint, hint to what I'm going to talk about later, the trouble for the Crew. Now, when we look at goalkeepers, I'm going to talk about not my favorite goalkeeper, not the one that should be maybe receiving the Golden Glove or anything like that, but I do like my stats and my advanced stats, and this one maybe explains a little bit the position of his team, how nobody wanted to win the West that much, and how a couple of wins here and there, maybe given by your goalkeeper, can make the difference between finishing top of the West and finishing third or fourth and having to play on the road in the playoffs. Let's look at, well, the Roman Empire. Post-shot expected goals minus goals allowed is a statistic that is used to show the influence of a goalkeeper on a season long to the result of your team, the goals scored or saved that he would give you. The amount of goals they let in versus the amount of goals they should have let in if the shots were efficient. The Emperor, the Roman Emperor, Roman Burki, plus 9.1. Almost 2 full post-shot expected goal above the second goalie on this list, Daniele Petrovic, Paes Kalina, Blake Willis, and Tim Melia is your top 8, but 9.1 for Roman Burki. This gives you an interesting aspect that this season, his performances and what he did for the club, for St. Louis City FC, is plus 9.1 win. And if we go back and we look at the standings here, 9.1 goal. If we look at the goal differential, 17, you take 9 out of there and you find yourself 8, which is just mid-table, not even that good. Maybe a couple of those wins this year they did get at 17 wins were influenced by directly what Roman bring. Roman bring about, 6 points. If it wasn't for Roman, maybe St. Louis would not even be in the playoffs. That is very interesting. That is very influential. That is right up there with why St. Louis had such a great year. Yes, recruiting was good. Yes, they had some good players and good leadership with Loven and other players that really influenced this team. Good support, great show of support in the stands. Love the stadium too. A lot of great things happening in St. Louis City SC in his first year. But Roman Burki, statistically speaking, brought a lot to the team, brought a lot of extra wins, extra goals to the team, or at least saved some goals and brought almost extra goals, and was able to influence a lot his team. Now, as we wrap up this season thought process that I am going through with you right now, who is my MVP? The player that I feel should be on top of this, because, I think it's a great player. I think he had a successful season. But who are the contenders? There's a few contenders when I think about it. Who's the favorite to win it? Mukhtar, Acosta, Almada, and Buanga are kind of like the top 4 names that I have that could win the MVP. But when I start to think who truly could win the MVP, there's only one name. Only one name comes to mind, and that is why. And that's Lucky Luciano Acosta, my 2023 MVP, my choice, and the choice that I think will win also the MVP going forward. It's a combination of all this. It's not because he's the best at one thing, it's because he's very, very good at a whole lot of different things. 17 goals, second in MLS, 14 assists, fourth in Major League Soccer. Goals per 90, not per game, but per 90, so goals per 90 minute played, 0.59. That's more than 1 goal every 2 games he played. Full games, if you want to look at it that way. And he's 7th in Major League Soccer on that statistic, according to FB Reference. 40 shots on target, 6th for Major League Soccer for Lucky Luciano, and 97 key passes, and he's 2nd in the entire league. So he can distribute, no problem there. He's on time, he's on point. He also can score. He's the 2nd best scorer in the league. That plus Cincinnati, where they finished, you have to find ways to, hype your good teams. Cincinnati might not win Coach of the Year. Cincinnati might not win another trophy here, but they could win the MVP. You have to find a way to celebrate the success stories. One way to celebrate the success story of Cincinnati is to give Luciano Acosta the MVP. And I do think that's what's going to happen for this one. And we'll give congratulations in advance to Luciano Acosta. Now, as I take a little sip of coffee before we continue, this show's going way longer than I thought, but it's going to be fun. We're going to go together through the process of this show because we're going to talk about Toronto. Yeah. Toronto FC. And that's a segment that is called That's Outrageous. It's outrageous. Outrageous. The amount of money that Toronto FC wasted in Major League Soccer in 2023. $21.373 million, the US kind, the most expensive kind. It's outrageous. How can you spend so much money and finish 29th in MLS, dead last with 22 points? How can you spend so much money and finish 29th for goals scored You have the second and third best paid player in the entire league, and that's only because Messi showed up midway. If it wasn't for Messi, you have the most expensive player on the pitch, offensive player, and heck, he's laughing at you all the way to the bank, cashing in, making fun of you while he deposits his 400Ks for his 25 children. 26 goals scored for one season as a team. That's only 6 more than Dennis Buanga. How is this possible? 28th for goal creating actions. Only 49. That's laughable. Worst record on the road. 13 losses, 4 draws, 0 win. The only team in Major League Soccer this year with no wins on the road. Ow! Outrageous. And they have the worst home record in the league. Also, they suck on the road. They suck at home. At least they're consistent. 4 wins, 7 losses, 6 draws at home. Heck, why even have a home record? And of course, that's very typical, and it goes in fashion with this. The worst goal differential in Major League Soccer, and heck, I haven't done the research, I don't know, but it must be the worst in history. Minus 33. They're down more goals than they've scored this year. That's how good this team has been. I'm Kevin Laramée, and after the break, we're going to look at my top 11 in Major League Soccer this year. And later in the show, my playoff primer, maybe predictions, and of course my top surprises, because there's always surprises when we are in the playoffs in Major League Soccer. We'll be right back after this short break. Able to calm down a little bit, you know. I'm getting a bit too excited. It's not good for my heart to talk about Toronto this way, but you know, they deserved it. They truly deserved it this year. Welcome back to Kevin on Soccer. Thanks for sticking around, and thanks for taking a second to subscribe to our show on YouTube. Makes a big difference, so we thank you for taking the time to click that subscribe button and that notification bell. It does help the algorithm of this channel to grow, and thank you for still watching this show, sticking around. And of course, on Apple Podcasts, you can subscribe to the channel and make sure you put this brand new podcast in the top, let's say top 500 of soccer podcasts in Canada. Now it's time for segment number 2, a segment that I like to call my top 11 in this year's season in Major League Soccer. Who would be my 11? There's no thoughts of tactics, and the formation makes no sense. It's a 3-4-3, but not because that's what I want to play with. It's because there's 3 defenders I wanted, 4 midfielders, and 3 forwards that I wanted to, amplify their voices this year. I do want to talk about also the goalkeeper. So let's start with the goalkeeper. Let's start with, Mr. Steve Clark joining us. Not really, but on the screen he is. 12 clean sheets, second in Major League Soccer for Steve Clark. He's my choice for my top 11 goalkeeper. It's not just about the amount of clean sheet. It's also, I like my goalkeepers to play with the ball, to help move the thing going forward. Houston made a big jump in how they played this year under Ben Olsen. One of the reasons is how Steve Clark is able to play with from the back. And if we look at qualified players and starting goalkeeper in Major League Soccer with at least 15 stars this year, Steve Clark is top of the class with 76.7% pass accuracy. That is a high number when we're looking at goalkeepers playing with the ball. That is the reason why Steve Clark gets the call for me between the pipes. Steve Clark would be my choice for my top goalkeeper. And we can go straight into the defenders, because I think defenders are very interesting. These are my top defenders. By the way, I do think Yemar is going to win Defender of the Year. But that would be my choices. Yemar, Andrade, with Seattle, 73 interceptions this year. That's the stat that I decided to highlight. He's first in Major League Soccer. My second one, Diego Palacios. 89 tackles, third in Major League Soccer for that statistic. Also represent that new wave of defenders for LAFC. LAFC trying to go back-to-back this year. They will need the help of players like him in the playoffs. Very interesting to see how he does versus Gold, White, and Kubas of Vancouver in the weekend. Shaq Moore, 70% of dribblers tackled the areas that he faced. He won 7 out of 10 duel against dribblers this year. That's 9th in Major League Soccer. He's bringing to this club not just a defense that's similar, well, not in the play or in the way, because Zimmerman plays very differently, but together they form a very, very interesting back line with Lovitz and a couple more. They are the best defense in Major League Soccer, and I think that is very interesting, and I wanted to highlight their great season, and I don't want to always just bring Zimmerman in and not just say, oh, congratulations, Zimmerman. He might just win Defender of the Year once again, because he's such a unique individual in how he plays and how he's portrayed and his characteristic. I do feel Shaq Moore needs to be highlighted also, and Shaq Moore, one of my favorite players this year, at least for a defender. Now, let's go right through our position and let's go with midfielders. I do think it's very interesting when we look at the midfielders, because we have quite a who's who of good defenders and midfielders. I could have chosen Carles Gil. There's a ton of players that could have been in those 4 midfielders. But those are players that I thought were needed to be talked about a bit more. Luciano Acosta, we've talked about him. He's my MVP. But he also has 87 successful dribbles this year, 30 Major League Soccer. He can play with the ball. I love midfielders to control, to be able to move with the ebb and flow of the game, to bring it up top, to bring the ball, control it there, give chances for his teammates. One thing that makes a great player is the way they adapt to how the team plays. San Jose needs Espinoza to cross and find players in the box, and he did that 99 times this year. First in Major League Soccer, Espinoza is a great midfielder, one of the best midfielders this year in Major League Soccer. I don't think he's talked enough about because of Acosta and Almada, but Espinoza is, in my opinion, top 5 in the league, and he's in my top 4 for my top 11 as midfielders. Almada, we don't need to talk about this for a whole lot, because it's not hard to know why he's there. He's also number 1 in Major League Soccer for passes into the penalty area, putting his teammates in great position. 91 passes into the penalty area this year. Ryan Gauld, for me, is very important also for Vancouver's chances of doing well in the playoffs. But this year, he really showed that he can take this team to another level. He can take this club, putting on his back, climb the Rocky Mountains, and put his team in the playoffs. Yes, he might have missed a couple penalties in his last go-around, but he's going to have the chance to avenge those penalties, playing at least twice against LAFC again this weekend. Ryan Gauld, 80 key passes, 5th in Major League Soccer. To me, one of the reasons why Vancouver made the playoffs. To me, one of the reasons why Sartini got an extra extension of contract, and also one of the best DPs ever signed by the Vancouver Whitecaps. I really am looking forward to that playoff, and that playoff, we'll talk about it after this short break, where we'll break down the bracket, look at the odds-on favorite to win the whole thing, who's going to raise the Philip F. Entritz Trophy, and I'll give you my top candidate for surprises in Major League Soccer after this short break. Nothing quite like having a couple of sips of coffee and looking at a bracket for the playoffs. It's going to be amazing. We'll have the odds-on favorite in a moment, and my top favorite to lose, maybe my top potential candidate to win the round one matchup they have against a favorite. Well, let's have some fun. Let's look at a bracket. The graphic department worked overtime on this show. By the way, this is the whole point of this show. We love doing graphics. And when I say we, it's I. It's just me. This show is produced 100% by me. And I do love my graphics. I do love how to package a show together. And this is also to have fun together in this way. Wednesday night, Kansas City facing San Jose in Kansas City. New York facing Charlotte. And those two will go into the bracket as the wildcard round. One game, winner moves on. Round 1, 2 out of 3. Sounders are facing FC Dallas. LAFC will be facing the Whitecaps. Look for more bonus coverage on that playoff series. I will be in LA and I will be in Vancouver for those matches. I'm assigned to the production of this match for MLS on Apple TV. So on the back end, I'll bring you some extra coverage. We will have a little bit of a game preview of this YouTube channel that you could watch, as I will be on location on a Santa Monica pier. I will experience that also, and I will film myself on, maybe not on the Ferris wheel, because Heights and myself don't really get along, but definitely I'll be walking on that pier for you. Houston, Salt Lake, interesting matchup. The winner will take on St. Louis SC or Kansas City or San Jose. Interesting matchup. The path to MLS Cup for the West is quite open. I do think that the winner of LAFC Vancouver has a chance to maybe squeak into the conference finals. I don't fancy Seattle that hardly in the playoffs, and Dallas, well, they're just happy to be there, and I think that's going to be dangerous when we get to the conference semifinal. And the bottom, I do think that it's kind of open in the West. St. Louis, they are beatable, and so for Houston or Salt Lake, whichever makes it all the way to the conference final, I think it's open, and I do think LA or Vancouver have a shot to make it all the way to MLS Cup, and that could be interesting. Let's go, Sartini! Shaken, not stirred. Welcome back to that saying. Go back to the Eastern Conference. Orlando, Nashville. That's a very interesting one. Orlando, Nashville. Nashville's the best defense in the league. Do not sleep on Nashville. Columbus, Atlanta. Another interesting matchup here. It's not easy in the West. And as much as we want to talk about an easy path on the West side, on the East side, it's a rough path. It's almost easier for Philly, who finished 4th, and they're facing the Rev 4th and 5. And they have Cincinnati, New York, or Charlotte, and they move on. But on the other side, the top side of that bracket, if you look on the screen, they're going to have to kill each other. Orlando and Nashville, that's a heck of a matchup. Columbus, Atlanta, maybe the two best teams in the East, facing each other in the first round of the playoffs. Which leads me to an interesting thought process. What's going to happen? Who's going to win? Who's favorite to win? The favorites that are inevitable to me. The only favorites that are really inevitable to me, I think, is Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati takes care of Charlotte or New York. And then in the semis, they'll get Philly or New England. This ain't last year's Philly. This ain't last year's New England. Both teams are takeable. Then they find themselves in a conference final. And then whoever survives that gauntlet, of that 4-team gauntlet, will maybe be healthy enough to take on Cincinnati. But that's where it becomes interesting. So to me, I do see a potential of having LA or Vancouver in MLS Cup with Cincinnati. That's kind of like my favorites are inevitable. And if we look at the odds-on favorites to win MLS Cup, I guess the bookies agree with me a little. First of all, the bookies like jazz, I guess. It does feel like a casino type of music, so. Look on the odds-on favorite to win MLS Cup. I did feel in Cincinnati would be inevitable, and Vegas agrees. FC Cincinnati plus 325 to win Major League Soccer. What does that mean, plus 325, if you're brand new to this show? By the way, I do not bet personally on Major League Soccer. Some of you are interested in that information. That is why it is on this very show. Plus 325 means that if you bet $100 on Cincinnati, you will get $325 back. Well, that's a profit of $225 for you. LAFC is second highest favorite, plus 600. St. Louis is third, plus 700. Orlando, plus 1050. That's 1,050. Philly, 1150. Columbus, 1,300. Seattle, 1,350. New England, 1,400. And then we get to the big numbers. Teams that are not favored whatsoever to win Major League Soccer, but could bring some value if things go the right way. If you do believe it's going to be a gauntlet in the top and there is a chance Nashville gets out, Nashville right now is plus 2,000. If they win the round one and they make it to the semi, those odds will drastically go down. And then you won't have as much value. Of course, there's teams that are not favored at all whatsoever. Charlotte, San Jose, Kansas City, plus 6,000. That's if you bet $100 on it, you'll get $6,000 back. It's a heck of a profit. It also won't happen, and that's why they give you those type of odds. So there's a chance that these couple of middling teams could actually make it far, and that's where you can get value. If you get a Philly at plus 1150, Orlando, a Seattle or Columbus, those brings good value and could be seen as good investment, but also you never know what can happen. There's always surprises in Major League Soccer's playoffs. There is always one favorite that goes down. It's very rarely, last year it happened, but very rarely number one on the West goes all the way through the MLS Cup, and the number one in the East makes it all the way to MLS Cup. This almost never happens. So, don't predict that it will in your prediction MLS Cup bracket. Just make sure there's an upset here and there. And I have 3 options for an upset. This is the culmination of this show. This is, well, the time to look at my top surprises. My top potential surprises in this year's playoffs. 3. I got 3 of them. Atlanta. They're facing Columbus in round number 1. Atlanta has a very dangerous attack. Second best attack after Columbus in the entire league by only 1 goal. Atlanta will not have Almeida for game number 1, but he can be there for game number 2 or 3, and that's good enough for me. Columbus defense is vulnerable. I covered their last match. They conceded to a Montreal team that's one of the worst attack in the league, and Columbus have been consistently conceding this year, also at home. They're vulnerable to take goals. Atlanta is fast and very quick to score, very quick to overwhelm you in the box with talented player Giakoumakis, Almeida. It could be dangerous. If you've listened to the entirety of this show, you know there's a few names you keep hearing. Almeida is one of them, and he can be very, very dangerous for Columbus's backline. Giakoumakis can get hot, scores in bunches, scores a couple, that's one game, and then you never know what can happen. I do believe Atlanta is a strong candidate to create an upset in round number 1 of the 2023 Major League Soccer's playoffs. Number 2, yes, Vancouver. I do fancy the Whitecaps. That's not only because I'm going to be there and I would love to maybe manifest it into existence, but it's also because I kind of believe in Sartini. And let's go right there. Sartini shaken, not stirred. He's going to bring this team all the way up like James Bond and making sure that it doesn't explode. He'll save this team from the precipice. They're going to fall down a hill and he's going to climb up and save them, just like James Bond. Because this team has played in a different level. With gold and white as a combo, it will find a way to win one of those games. And that's the thing here. This could be 4 straight games versus LAFC. You're bound to find something. You're bound to find an opportunity. They're not going to like each other. There's going to be some chippiness. And who knows, maybe they can get an advantage. Maybe LAFC, one of their players, is going to go on tilt and get a red card. And maybe this way Vancouver gets an advantage and they squeeze a game. And then it's 1-1 and you get to a deciding third game. Yes, it will be in LA, but heck, who knows? 4 straight times they could play against LA. And I don't think LAFC is going to beat them 4 straight times. Well, it'll be 3 straight times and the third game would not be necessary. I do believe Vancouver gets at least 1, and then heck, you never know what can happen. And let's go now, let's finish this show with our third candidate to create an upset. My third potential surprise in these round 1 of this Major League Soccer's playoffs. Nashville. The best damn defense in the league. Only 32 goals against this year. That's very, very few. If you're looking at some teams conceded like over 60 goals. So that's 32 goals allowed by Nashville. They have a player called Hani Mukhtar, year in, year out, a contender for MVP. He's a game breaker. By himself, he can take over a game and score a goal. And then, well, it's different. It's an opportunity. And Nashville's facing Orlando. Nashville is not afraid of Orlando. Nashville is a team that should be higher than their seeding. Yes, they are 7th by their seeding, but it's so tight and their team is so good defensively and they have a potential to score. I think it's just about making it. They make it into the playoffs. They are where they are. They're 7th. But if they can make it and they can stay in this game or these games late, they have a chance to win off a set piece. They have a chance to win off an aerial ball that a Zimmerman wins or somebody else. Where they're the 4th best in Major League Soccer when it comes to aerial balls. 15.5% of them were won by their players this year. And that's 4th best in MLS. Those factors could be enough. And that could tilt the balance in Nashville's way. Those are my candidates for upsets. 3. Atlanta, Vancouver, or Nashville. Will it happen? Will all 3 happen? Who knows? But that's what I foresee. Nostradakev is saying there's a possibility. We'll see. If you're a Vancouver fan, rest assured it's going to be an entertaining one. And you're set for the future with this team, maybe the best Canadian team for the next few years in Major League Soccer. Atlanta, next year you'll be a strong contender. In Nashville, you will also be a very good contender every single time you have a defense like you have. So, should be great playoffs. I hope you're going to stick with this show through the playoffs. Happy to be here with you back. It's good to see you. Thank you for sticking around the entire show and listening to Kevin on Soccer. You can subscribe to this show wherever you get your podcasts and, of course, Apple Podcasts. And you can take a second. That would be very appreciated to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just click that subscribe button, click that notification bell, and make sure you never miss a show. And in the words of a great philosopher, until next time, as I always say, have a great soccer.